Have you ever noticed there are men who never raise their voice, never argue, never explain, and yet somehow they control the room? They don't beg to be understood. They don't chase validation. They don't fight to be seen. They just withdraw. And the second they do, the air changes. The room feels colder. People shift in their seats. The silence suddenly feels heavy, almost hostile. That isn't passivity. That is calculated power. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology ever put language to it. To him, withdrawal wasn't running away. It was domination through absence. He said a prince must know how to disappear without losing influence, because when you vanish on purpose, you become a mirror. And in that mirror, people don't just see you. They see their dependency, their entitlement, their discomfort with no longer having access to what they took for granted. People don't actually fear losing your love. They fear losing their grip on you. They don't miss you. They miss their ability to summon you. And if you've been the man who always shows up, the one who answers instantly, even when you're exhausted, the one who over-explains just to keep the peace, then you haven't been loved. You've been used. Machiavelli would tell you straight, predictability is not a virtue. It's a liability. The man who is always reachable is never feared. And the man who is never feared is always controlled. You think your kindness is building connection. But kindness without boundaries doesn't build respect. It breeds contempt. You slowly get demoted from man of value to background function. You turn into emotional furniture, an on-call butler for everyone else's moods and chaos. Every time you say yes when your soul is screaming, say nothing. You're trading your dignity for a cheap hit of feeling needed. Machiavelli would call that exactly what it is. Weakness dressed up as virtue. He'd warn you, never allow your worth to be measured by how much you're willing to please. Because when you're always there, you lose the one thing that makes anything valuable: scarcity. And scarcity is the foundation of influence. So the next time you feel that urge to type out a paragraph, to justify yourself, to reassure somebody who has never reassured you, don't. Withdraw, not as revenge, not as a tantrum, but as a strategy of refinement. You are reintroducing yourself as a different kind of man, not a servant to their needs, but a sovereign presence whose silence now carries more weight than his words ever did. Withdrawal isn't cowardice, it's evolution. It's the moment you stop reacting and start positioning. The moment you become unpredictable, unreachable, untouchable, and that's when they finally start to panic. Because when you disappear without warning, they're not really wondering, what happened to him? They're wondering, what power did he finally discover that made him stop explaining himself? If that hits something deep inside you, carve this into the comments. I disappear to reclaim my power. And if you want to keep walking this path of quiet, ruthless strategy, you already know what to do. Subscribe not to chase noise, but to rise above it as the kind of man who commands respect by vanishing. Now understand this. If you want to survive in a world ruled by perception, you have to kill one illusion. The illusion that goodness alone will protect you. The truth is brutal. Being useful is not power. Being predictable is not loyalty. Being always available is the slow death of respect. From the moment you were a kid, you were trained out of your edge. Be nice. Say yes. Don't make people uncomfortable. Answer quickly. Apologize even when it's not your fault. Machiavelli would smirk at that conditioning. He didn't believe in moral submission. He believed in power management. And if you're always accessible, always explaining, always smoothing things over, you've already stepped down from the throne of your own life. Because the man who makes himself cheap will never be treated as rare. You think your fast replies show commitment. You think saying, "it's okay" all the time proves your understanding. But what you are actually building is not connection. You're building expectation. And expectation is the assassin of appreciation. He wrote that the man who seeks to be loved by everyone becomes the slave of the ungrateful. People don't respect the man who always says yes. They use him. Here's how it plays out in real life. They message you. You respond in seconds. They complain. You rush to explain. They create drama. You play therapist. You become their crisis manager, their emotional shock absorber, their on-demand comfort. But you weren't born to be padding between them and their discomfort. You were born to live a life ruled by your own values, not their moods. Machiavelli wouldn't pat you on the back and tell you it's okay. He'd shake you awake. He'd tell you, when they expect you, disappear. When they depend on you, detach. When they assume they own your time, remind them you belong to no one. Because the man who cannot disrupt expectations will spend his life chained to them. You think explaining yourself makes you noble, but in the hands of a manipulative person, your explanations aren't understood as honesty. They're treated as confessions. Your transparency becomes ammunition. Your unfiltered kindness becomes a leash. So, what do? You break the rhythm. You interrupt the pattern. You withdraw without warning. You let them feel the emptiness they pretended didn't matter. Their comfort with your constant availability collapses into discomfort with your new boundaries. That's how you take the frame back. You replace predictability with tactical silence. You answer only when it truly serves you. You remember that access to your mind, your time, your energy is not a right. It is a reward. So the next time you feel pressure to respond, pause and ask, does this person truly deserve a piece of my inner world? Or are they just addicted to the version of me that never says no? If it's not a clear and powerful yes, then it is a strategic no. This is not cruelty. It's clarity. This is not ego. It's sovereignty. If this burns a little, let it. And if you're ready to kill the obedient version of you that always picks up on the first ring, write this in the comments. My predictability is my enemy. There's a truth few men realize. Every word you speak, every argument you enter, every emotional fire you put out for someone else, it all costs you something. And most men never notice they're being robbed. They wake up tired, not from work, but from exposure. Exposure to people who drain them, to situations that weaken them, to habits that leak their energy drop by drop, until nothing's left but quiet resentment. Machiavelli wouldn't call that burnout. He'd call it strategic failure. Because the man who spends his power fighting small, meaningless battles has nothing left when the real war begins. And your energy is a form of currency. Every thought, every reaction, every emotion draws from a limited reservoir. Carl Jung said that. But Machiavelli would go even further. He wouldn't just protect his energy, he'd weaponize it. He'd treat it like a king treats gold. Not to hand out freely, but to gain advantage. You might think you're being noble by always showing up, by defending yourself, by constantly being the bigger person. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Every time you react, you're being mapped. Manipulators don't need to overpower you. They just need you to waste yourself. And you do it willingly under the illusion of kindness. But in reality, you're surrendering your kingdom. Machiavelli would never allow that. He'd tell you to withdraw your energy from the useless, to let fools destroy themselves in the silence you refuse to break. Because when you stop giving them your validation, your time, your attention, you become dangerous. And when you become dangerous, they'll label you. They'll call you cold. They'll call you selfish. They'll call you distant. But Machiavelli would just smile. Because now you've become unpredictable. You're no longer easy to provoke. You've become unreadable. And the unreadable man, he becomes ungovernable. You weren't meant to pour yourself out like a public fountain. You were built to guard your inner fire like a fortress, because when your energy becomes sacred, your presence becomes rare. And when your presence is rare, it becomes power. So here's your command. Stop defending yourself in pointless battles. Start conserving yourself for meaningful wars. The next time someone demands your reaction, pause. Ask yourself, do they want resolution or do they just want control? If the answer isn't clear, default to silence. Not because you're weak, but because you're done being played. Type this if it hits you right now. My energy feeds no fools, because from this moment on, you no longer react, you calculate. You no longer explain, you observe. You no longer waste, you preserve. Silence is not retreat, it's not surrender, and it's never weakness. Silence is a setup. It's the quiet before the strike. It's the weapon of those who've stopped dancing to the noise of others. Machiavelli didn't see silence as absence. He saw it as camouflage. He said the wise man doesn't need to lie. He only needs to withhold. Because in a world where everyone's shouting, the man who says nothing becomes a threat. When you go silent, you break the rhythm, you remove yourself from their script. You become unreadable. And what people can't read, they can't control. Those who once praised your kindness and dependability will suddenly shift. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you've become distant, arrogant, cruel. But they were never admiring your character. They were admiring their control over you. Machiavelli knew this dynamic perfectly. He'd say that when silence enters the room, it doesn't calm people, it exposes them. Silence doesn't confuse the strong. It only terrifies the manipulative, because silence breaks the mirror, and those who used you to see their comfort suddenly face themselves, and most can't handle what they see. They loved you when you were predictable, when you echoed their moods, when you softened their insecurities. But when you go quiet, they lose their reflection, and that's when the mask collapses. They'll accuse you. They'll twist your silence into guilt. They'll call your boundaries cruelty. They'll call your growth betrayal. Don't react. Because in that moment, you're watching their illusion unravel. Carl Jung called it the breakdown of the persona, the collapse of the mask we wear to be liked. Machiavelli would simply call it the start of the real game, because now you're not who they want you to be. You're who you choose to be, not polite, not predictable, but powerful. You don't explain anymore. You don't soothe anyone to keep the peace. You let them interpret your silence however they need to. Let them spiral. Let them panic. Let them dig their own psychological graves trying to decode your stillness. Because the greatest exposure doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from withdrawal. So here's your new internal command. Do not explain. Do not chase. Do not clarify. Let the silence speak for you. Let it rattle the ones who depended on your obedience. If this resonates, write it in the comments. My silence is the end of their illusion. Because in a world addicted to noise, silence is rebellion. And in the game of power, silence isn't surrender, it's dominance. When you stop reacting, you don't just escape chaos. You control it. You flip the board. You walk away from the rules they thought defined you. Suddenly, they don't know what you're thinking. They don't know what triggers you. They don't even know if you're still in the game. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is not always necessary to strike. Sometimes not moving at all is the most terrifying strike of all." Because when you withhold your response, you create pressure, a vacuum. They start talking more, revealing more, panicking more. And in that panic, they expose themselves. Most people are trained to react instantly to every provocation, because the moment you react, they own you. You're no longer sovereign. You're being pulled by invisible strings. But when you resist, when you choose stillness over noise, They collapse under the weight of their own projection. Manipulators hate silence. They can't use it. They can't control it. They can't predict it. You don't need to shout. You don't need to prove anything. You don't even need to win arguments, because silence kills their narrative without you lifting a finger. Carl Jung said silence reconnects you to your true self, but Machiavelli would say, it disconnects your enemies from theirs. It turns their aggression inward. It lets them destroy themselves in the void you left behind. That's not weakness. That's siege warfare. Psychological dominance through stillness. They spend. You conserve. They attack. You observe. They burn out. You sharpen. And here's the timeless rule. He who speaks first exposes first. He who reacts loses control. But he who holds silence owns the moment. Let the silence stretch. Let them feel it. Let their own words echo back with no reply to hide behind. Because in silence, you reveal everything while showing nothing. If that hits, type it below. My silence commands. You were trained to explain yourself, to justify your silence, to apologize for your solitude. You were taught that if you set boundaries, you must soften them with an explanation. That if you take space, you owe people a reason. But Machiavelli would call that your first mistake. He said, he who justifies his every step gives others the right to question it. And once people feel entitled to question your choices, they'll never stop. Every time you say, sorry I didn't reply, or I was just busy, you reinforce their illusion that they deserve an answer. But they don't. They never did. Your silence isn't rudeness. It's a declaration. Your boundaries aren't cruelty. They are the architecture of your self-respect. And your detachment isn't arrogance. It's the recalibration of a man who finally realizes how much he's given and how little was ever returned. The moment you stop explaining, you reclaim something sacred, authority over your own narrative. Because when people grow used to your explanations, they stop respecting your instincts. They stop trusting your no. They start expecting you to justify your own peace. And when you don't, they panic. That panic is not your problem. It's their discomfort meeting your clarity. You are not here to soothe everyone's fears. You are not here to be universally liked. You are here to be clear. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you tolerate. Clear about who earns access to you. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He said a ruler must choose between being loved and being respected. Only one ensures order. Too many men chase love. They think love will keep them safe. But love without respect turns to control. And the man who seeks to be loved by all becomes a servant to their emotions. He gives his energy to everyone except himself. Clarity, on the other hand, is a sword. And silence is its sheath. You wield both when you stop defending your peace. So when someone says you've changed, just smile. Not because they're wrong, but because they finally noticed. You're not here to be accessible. You're not here to be explainable. You're here to evolve. And evolution doesn't ask for permission. Let them misunderstand you. Let them invent stories to explain your distance. Let them call you cold. Because every man who rises into sovereignty must first face the guilt of no longer being available to those who only loved his obedience. If you feel that shift rising inside you, carve this truth into your identity. I owe no explanations for protecting my peace. There's a kind of pain few men talk about. It doesn't come from betrayal or loss. It comes from withdrawal. You stop replying. You stop explaining. You step out of the roles they wrote for you. At first, it feels like freedom. Then, it feels like doubt. And finally, it hits the quiet. The uncomfortable silence where their expectations used to live. You start to question yourself. Did I go too far? Was I too cold? Did I just destroy the bridges I needed? Machiavelli would meet you in that silence, not with comfort, but with truth. He'd say, power isn't born in applause. It's born in isolation. And isolation isn't punishment. It's purification. This isn't the pain of losing people. It's the pain of losing the version of you that needed their approval, the version that lived for their validation, that stayed in rooms just to feel useful. You're not suffering from loneliness. You're suffering from withdrawal. Withdrawal from the addiction of being needed, from the comfort of being expected, from the illusion of being liked. Every time you said yes just to avoid tension, you said no to yourself. Every time you showed up to prove you were good, you stepped further away from what made you powerful. Machiavelli would call this what it is, a strategic death. The death that comes before rebirth. Because until the obedient version of you dies, the sovereign one can't rise. So let it hurt. Let it burn. Let the echoes of your old self scream in protest, because that ache you feel right now, it's not weakness, it's detox. And what's rising in that void is something far more dangerous. A man who no longer needs permission, a man who doesn't explain, a man who disappears and returns as his own force of nature. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole. Machiavelli would call it a transfer of power, power taken back from those who fed on your need to be seen. It will feel uncomfortable. It will feel unnatural. But so does every great transformation. The lion isn't born in a crowd. He's born in solitude. He roars not for approval, but because he finally remembers his own voice. So don't run from the silent, stand in it. Let it sting. Let it strip you down. Let it rebuild you. Because this isn't loss. It's the shedding of what was small. You didn't lose them. You lost the illusion of them. And in that loss, you found yourself. If you can feel this shift rising inside you, whisper it like a vow. My solitude is my sanctuary. Because there's a difference between being seen and being remembered, between being around and being respected, between being liked and being valued. Most men confuse attention with influence, but Machiavelli understood something far deeper. He said, "The prince who is always seen becomes ordinary, but the one who controls when and how he appears becomes unforgettable." Your presence used to be constant, predictable, accessible. That made you convenient, but never powerful. What is always available loses its mystery. What is always visible loses its edge. What is always present becomes invisible. You showed up before they even missed you. You explained before they even questioned. You gave before they even asked. And in doing so, you trained them to take you for granted. But here's the truth. No one told you. Scarcity creates value. Distance creates respect. Silence creates gravity. You don't have to vanish completely. You just need to become strategic with your presence. When you speak too often, your words lose weight. But when you speak rarely, every sentence becomes an earthquake. When you're everywhere, you become noise. But when you appear only when it matters, you become signal. Machiavelli would call this calculated absence. Not to manipulate, but to build gravity. Let them feel your absence so they remember the cost of your presence. This isn't cruelty. It's discipline. It's asset protection. Your time, your energy, your attention, these are not donations. They are investments. And not everyone qualifies. So here's the new rule. Not everyone gets a reply. Not everyone gets an explanation. Not everyone earns your presence. The more they assume you'll show up, the more you must challenge that assumption. Because when people don't know where you stand, they begin to feel your power. Think of gold. Its worth isn't in how it shines, but in how rare, guarded, and difficult it is to reach. So ask yourself, why should your presence be any less valuable? Why should your attention be handed out like a free sample? The man who is always seen is soon forgotten. But the man who controls when to enter, when to speak, and when to vanish becomes unforgettable. That isn't arrogance. That's sovereignty. It's the behavior of kings, men who don't exist for convenience, but for consequence. From now on, treat your attention as currency, your presence as leverage, your absence as a reminder. With every text, every meeting, every call, ask yourself, has this person earned my presence or just expected it? If you can feel the answer deep in your gut, then type it in the comments as your new law. My presence is earned. Because from this point on, you no longer exist to be available. You exist to be remembered. What you've just heard is not inspiration. It's not self-help. It's warfare. A silent war between the man you were trained to be and the man you were meant to become. The first one was raised to obey, to please, to explain. He was taught that peace comes from being liked, that validation equals worth. He lived on his knees, calling it virtue. The second man, the one now awakening inside you, he is built differently. He doesn't chase. He calculates. He doesn't react. He observes. He doesn't need approval. He needs command. Machiavelli never promised comfort. He promised clarity. He didn't teach love without leverage. He taught power wrapped in composure. He didn't glorify the gentleman who sacrifices himself for everyone's peace. He glorified the one who knows when to withdraw his kindness, when to make silence louder than words, and when to turn distance into dominance. Because here's the law. The man who cannot command himself will always be commanded by others. And self-command begins with one ruthless act: withdrawal. Withdrawal from weakness, from over-explaining, from emotional servitude, from chasing people who have never once pursued your respect. When you withdraw, you create distance. And in that distance, your power crystallizes. You become unpredictable, unreadable, untouchable. That's where true power is born. Because when people can no longer read you, they can no longer control you. When they can't predict your next move, they begin to fear losing access to you. And when they fear losing access, you control the dynamic. When you stop reacting, they don't just ask where you went, they ask what they lost. When you stop explaining, you don't just draw lines, you build standards. And standards transform presence into authority. The moment you stop seeking clarity in others, you begin building certainty within yourself. You stop performing for validation. You stop apologizing for your evolution. You stop defending your silence to people terrified of it. Machiavelli would tell you this directly. Power is not granted. It is taken. And once taken, it must be guarded through calculation and discipline. You are not here to be available to everyone. You are not here to be easily understood. You are not here to prove your goodness to people who benefit from your guilt. You are here to rule the one empire that truly belongs to you, your inner kingdom. And every kingdom requires borders, walls, gates, guards. Not everyone deserves entry. Not everyone earns proximity. Not everyone gets access. This is the Machiavellian man. He doesn't explain. He doesn't react. He doesn't beg to be seen. He speaks when it serves him. He vanishes when it strengthens him. And he reappears only when the advantage is his. Your new life won't begin with applause. It will begin in silence. And it won't end in comfort. It will end in command. Command not over others, but over yourself. Because that's where all other power originates. From now on, Let others talk. Let them speculate. Let them wonder. Let them miss you. You withdraw. You observe. You wait. And you move only when you decide. Because Machiavelli knew, the game doesn't belong to the honest. It belongs to the prepared. And preparation begins with discipline. Discipline over emotion, impulse, and reaction. You must learn to see silence as a weapon, distance as armor, and self-command as your crown. Weak men chase understanding. Powerful men act with purpose, even when they're misunderstood. Stop explaining your worth. Stop justifying your silence. Stop wasting your power trying to convince people who are never meant to comprehend it. Let your absence be your answer. Let your restraint be your proof. Let your composure be your language. Speak less, but when you do, let every word strike like a blade. Appear rarely, but when you do, let your presence shift the atmosphere. Every action must now serve strategy. Every word must now serve purpose. Because when your attention becomes selective, you stop chasing validation and start radiating gravity. You no longer chase the spotlight. It follows your stillness. You no longer demand respect. Your restraint earns it. You no longer need to prove power. You embody it. This is the transformation few survive, because it demands you become the villain in weak people's stories. But that's the price of sovereignty. It's not chaos. It's control. It's not arrogance. It's authority. It's not coldness. It's clarity. You've crossed the line from reacting to ruling, from emotion to strategy, from noise to presence. So write these laws into your soul. Withdraw when expected. Speak when necessary. Move when victory is certain. You are not protecting your peace. You are protecting your throne. And that throne, the seat of your will, your focus, your energy, is guarded not by words, but by silence. Every silence you hold builds pressure. Every distance you create builds leverage. Every restraint you practice builds dominion. This is your rebirth, the death of obedience, the rise of self-rule. From this moment on, you don't seek to be understood. You don't chase to be loved. Be feared for your clarity. Be respected for your control. Be remembered for your absence. Because the world doesn't follow the loud. It follows the calm, the cold, the calculated. And from this moment forward, you are no longer reacting to the noise of the world. You are the silence that controls it. You don't compete for attention. You command it. You don't play the game for survival. You own the board.